I'm Joan McKinnon with the gan.hort.soc Horticultural Society, and we're going to be doing a talk today about how to plant spring bulbs. One of the things that I most look forward to in the spring is seeing my bulbs come up, and the very first ones are snowdrops. Sometimes snowdrops are in my garden as early as sometime in March. Other years when it's colder, it might be the beginning of April, but it's certainly something to look forward to. They're also some of the earliest bulbs that you need to plant. They're very small. You don't want them to dry out or they won't bloom. So you need to get them in early September if you can, and get them into your garden. This type of bulb you want to plant about 3 inches deep. They will continue to divide, as you can see this one has, over the years, and so you'll get more and more little tiny snowdrops blooming in your yard. Now, these actually came from my garden. This year the bulbs in the stores are late. They normally are here by this time, which is early September. However, there was a strike at the Port of Montreal, and I went looking for bulbs from here to Ottawa, and nobody has them. So as a result, all these bulbs have come from our gardens. Another very early and small bulb is the Chionodoxa. It's very similar looking, maybe looks a little bit more like a tulip. It's also one that you would only plant about 2 or 3 inches deep, so very close to the surface. And these tiny bulbs you want to plant in large numbers. If you plant 6 bulbs, for example, it's going to look like nothing. You want to have at least 20 or 30 or even more than that to make a little bit of a statement in your garden. Then we have crocuses. These crocuses have been out in a field for quite a few years, and they are quite tiny. If I were to show you ones that I just bought at the store, they'd probably be at least double this size. And these are actually a corm. They're a little harder to tell which way is up, but usually if you can see some roots at the bottom, that tells you that's the bottom, and a point at the top means that's the top. But if you ever have a question about which way is up with a bulb, you can always plant it on its side, and that way it will find its way to the surface. So these ones are crocuses, which also are an early bloomer. Then we have species tulips. And they bloom about the same time as daffodils. So species tulips are small, and they have a sort of a skin on them. It's not absolutely essential to have that skin, but it is something that's good to look for when you're buying them. You don't want them to be gray or sort of greenish with a moldy covering on them. That usually means that they're rotten. So if you happen to buy a bag and you don't realize that you've gotten a bad one, throw that one out. It's just not worth planting it. So these ones are actually an orange species tulip, which means that they are a type that is the original types, not one of the hybrids that we typically plant in our gardens today. And they also are planted a little more shallowly, maybe at about 4 inches or so deep. These ones are daffodils. And you'll notice that they are a bigger bulb. Again, these are smallish. They've come from my garden. They are a variety called ice follies. And ice follies divides and divides and divides. I started out with 10 or 15 in my garden 10 years ago, and when I dug them up, I dug up 220. So when you're buying them, it's nice to buy ones that have at least 2 noses. You can see the noses here. The more noses, the more flower stalks that will come up, the more flowering stems that there are. Sometimes you can actually find ones that have 3 noses. So when I'm choosing daffodils, I like to get them from a place where I can actually choose the individual bulbs, and I will buy the biggest ones I can for the most part. We have regular tulips, which are generally a bit later than the daffodils. These are ones that I just dug up from the park here. These are a variety called Pretty Princess. They bloomed here last year and they were gorgeous, and hopefully they will bloom again. they're an early tulip. We want them to be early because we know that we're going to have to pull out the stalks so that we can plant our petunias in the central garden. But if you plan carefully, you can have tulips blooming from middle of April until actually the very beginning of June. So it's an amazing time period. You have everything from Darwin, Triumph, you have lily-flowered tulips, you have peony-flowered tulips. It's amazing the number of different types and colors of tulips that you can find when you're buying them. We have hyacinths. This is a hyacinth bulb from my garden. It's a bigger bulb, very scented, and so it's nice to plant these right beside a walkway where you can smell them. You can also grow these in a hyacinth glass inside. There's special vases for these, and they just sit on top of water, and then it will send up a shoot, usually in February, with a nice big bulb, and you can enjoy that in your kitchen or dining room or whatever you have. The final one I'm going to show you, and these are funny lopsided looking bulbs, but this is a good bulb. These are from giant alliums. Now you look at these and you go, okay, which way is up on these? So this is the root area. So this is going to go down. This is going to be where the shoot comes out. I was actually surprised when I dug these up yesterday how many bulbs had been created from a number of stalks that I planted, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. So these are just some of the most common types, and within every one of these types there are many, many different species. Alliums are often purple or white, but you can get little tiny ones that are yellow. Daffodils come in many, many different varieties, typically whites and yellows. The common type that we think of as King Alfred is not actually King Alfred anymore, but those are the ones that are fully yellow. There are ones that are doubles. There are some being sold now as having pink cups. I personally don't think they're telling us the truth. I have never actually seen a true pink daffodil. They are often sort of an apricot color, and you'll pay a premium for these pink tulips, but I think there's been a lot of photoshopping going on. So just beware. I brought one of my favorite bulb books with me. So you can see from this that there are many, many different types of bulbs. If you look through here, I mean, just for the crocuses, for example, there are pages of crocuses, pages and pages of daffodils. So there's all sorts of varieties that you can plant. One thing that I like to do when I'm planting them, and we'll do it when we go over here and plant some of these daffodils, is I like to plant them in a group, spaced out but in a group. I hate seeing one tulip soldier after another along the front of a house. I would much rather see a group of them, and the more you plant the better. I like to plant in groups of at least 10. If you can manage 15, that's better. We will show you some pictures in this video of the tulips in the front of our memorial stone here, and the grape hyacinths that surround it. The grape hyacinths are coming up right now. They actually form their leaves in the fall. But it's actually a wave of color that goes all the way around, with hyacinths behind them and then the tulips behind that. Tulips in general are not really perennial. Typically, if you plant 10 tulips one year, you'll get about 6 the next year, and the following year, the third year, you'll get 1 or 2. So about every third year, you have to replace most of your tulips. They are beautiful, it's worth the effort, but it's a little frustrating when you get a look that you like and they just disappear. Species tulips, like I showed you here, they are long-lived and they will pretty well keep coming back. And some varieties of tulips are more reliable than others. Darwin and Triumph in particular are more likely to last and come up for quite a few years. Some of the others, the fancier ones, you'll get 1 year, 2 years, and then they're gone. they split and there just really isn't anything left after a couple of years. People like to dig in different ways. I like to make a big hole for my daffodils or tulips and then plant them spaced out within that hole. Some people like to use a round digger. I've had one. I didn't find it work particularly well for me, so I'm going to dig a hole. I've cleared off some of the mulch that was on top, the cedar mulch. I'll put it back when I'm done. So for daffodils, you want to go about 6 inches deep if you can. Same for tulips in general, but I have read such different information for tulips. It's amazing. I've read anywhere from planting it really, really deep. That is part of that. Okay, that's not going to work too well right there. I just read yesterday that they were recommending you only plant them about 2 inches deep. So I'm going to go with the standard, which is 6 inches. That's what we normally do, and they normally seem to work well. A concern that a great many people have is about rodents and squirrels digging up your bulbs. They won't dig up daffodils. Daffodils are poisonous to them, and they don't like them. So daffodils are a great choice if you have deer or squirrels in your area. So we'll start with this one. These are a variety called ice follies. They're fairly early. And I'm going to add a little bit of fertilizer, which in this case is blood meal, or bone meal. If I was planting tulips, which I'm going to plant some back over on the other side, for those I would add blood meal. In fact, for anything that the squirrels really do like, if you add blood meal, not only is it a fertilizer, but they don't like the scent of the blood meal. So this is what it looks like. Whereas the bone meal is white. Well, this one isn't. Most of the time it is. This is sort of a grayish color, but I'm going to add it down here. Just sprinkle in a handful. Then plant each one separately with the noses up, the little area that's got roots at the bottom. They are about 6 inches deep. See, here's one that's divided almost into 3. And I'll plant them about 3 inches apart. So this hole is not terribly big. I'm only going to be able to get in perhaps, I don't know, maybe 10 in this hole. I like to have at least 10 in one location. Okay, so there's 10. So that'll be a little patch of sunshine come about the middle of April. I'm going to cover these up again. The earth down as well as I can, and then cover it back up with our nice cedar mulch here. And there we go, first lot planted. So I'm going to plant some more here and over here, but I won't do it on camera. I'll do it later on. So we're going to take our tulips back over to the central garden, which is where I dug them up from just a little while ago, just to show you about adding some of the bone meal. So I'm going to replant these tulips that I dug up from here a little while ago. I got them from in here. Normally we couldn't possibly plant tulips until much later in the season. Typically it's the end of October before we can, because we have to wait for frost, and then we pull out our absolutely gorgeous mass of petunias here. So in this central garden, we typically have about 400 tulips, and we have to replace them usually about every third year. I am going to put some blood meal in the bottom here to discourage the squirrels. Mix it in a little bit, and just plant these back in again with the little pointy side up, the side that will have the roots at the bottom. And I'm pressing it in firmly, and pressing that one in firmly. I'm going to give it a little bit of bone meal on top, and then cover her up again, and hopefully rearrange the petunia so that it doesn't look like I was in here. Afterwards, I'm going to just water these areas lightly, not heavily. Just give them a bit of water, and then hope that it gets some rain over the next little while. Okay, so there we go. Now that was easy because of course I only planted 2 tulips there, but planting the 400 that we did here took maybe an hour, partly because by that point everything else had been taken out. It's more difficult to plant when you have other plants around. Another thing you can do, because you've got little tiny bulbs that bloom early to great big bulbs, you can plant in layers. So you could have daffodils on the bottom layer, and then say right above them you could have snowdrops. So the daffodils are 6 inches down, the snowdrops or crocuses are about 3 inches down. So then you get a layering of color over a season. And that's a fun way to extend your season if you have a small garden in particular. Thank you. I can't think of anything else right now. We would certainly encourage you to send your questions to us to the gan.hort.soc @gmail.com email address. We'll be glad to answer questions. Certainly this is a great way to provide some color in the spring and have something to look forward to after our long cold winters. Thank you, and we'll see you in the spring.